Hi, thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. I'm Reverend MeeLing, also been known as Reverend Susan MeeLing, Lady Dori, Belle. Been known by a few names, quite a few. So I showed that prior video, and I'll just do this real quick, just as a quick little reminder of that, that whole haven't turned off the electrical stuff because, need that, right? That's just, no big deal. So anyway, in that discussion, I kind of figured it might be a little important to go over certain aspects, right? Because why would I be able to do that? Well, few different things. I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, and ever since waking up from the coma with the subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain, that whole thing that took a couple of years to dissipate and go away as far as the subarachnoid hemorrhage portion. The after effects, that didn't go away at all. No, stayed. And so, it's just, what is the worst that could happen, right? I mean, I only went from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math, and I deal with headaches and migraines on a constant basis. And the more important aspect in reference to the electrical stuff. Well, after I woke up from my coma and I was in medical hold unit at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas, there had been this point where I had been walking, and one of the soldiers was on the computer. I tripped, and he was on the computer in a different area, but where I tripped, I had accidentally touched the tower that was attached to the desktop that he was using. And, well, then there was this big issue throughout the orderly room. And after that, about 2003, I was using my now dead ex-husband's computer, and I had gone through Reiki attunements, and I felt that there were problems online. All I had done was check my email. That's all I did. And I felt these weird feelings in regards to people online. And not their accounts necessarily, because that's not people, but the actual people that were associated with the different accounts. And I felt that all of the different people had these different pains. I know that sounds weird, but I've always been kind of sensitive in regards to picking up on people's feelings. And it's not invasive, it's just people naturally emanate certain things as far as what's going on, their worries or concerns, and that's obviously in person when I'm discussing that portion. That doesn't go into the online thing, but in reference to before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, I guess the term is empathic as well as clairsentience, and I could just pick up on things. That's another reason why I fought to be emancipated, to join the United States of America's Armed Forces, because I could feel there were a bunch of different things that were going on. I had the nightmare that later turned into a dream, so on and so forth. And I was extremely concerned about all of the people, at least in reference to my nightmare / dream, I was very concerned about all of the people in the immediate area, as well as that could possibly be affected. And I didn't want the nightmare aspect to go forward in the way that I had seen it. And I wanted to find a better way that would minimize all damages, as well as make the world better. And I know that sounds hippy-dippy, which is kind of ironic because I'm far from a hippie. However, in a genuine way of wanting to find the way that could be a possibility that would genuinely help and make things so much better for so many more than just myself. And at that time, I was already dealing with what I was dealing with as a child growing up where I did. And realistically, I shouldn't have been allowed to do certain things when I was a child. Probably shouldn't have been told, hey, go ahead, go walk around in that neighborhood, no big deal. What's the worst thing that could happen? In the 5 boroughs of New York in the 1980s and 1990s. What's the worst thing that could happen to you? And then, I mean, I'm alive, so, there's that. What's the worst thing that could happen if you just go walk around, in Trenton or Camden or Elizabethtown in the 1980s and 1990s? What's the worst thing? And so I actually had a discussion with a guy, friend like family, yesterday in some references to that sort of thing. So today is the 25th of June, 2020, by the way. And so there was a lot of stuff that I, as a child, first and foremost, at that time, what could I do, right? And so I actually genuinely thought about different ways that would be a possibility. And then fighting to be emancipated to join the United States of America's Armed Forces. And then there was the head injury, and I couldn't go forward in the way that I had thought in that reference point. And so I had essentially woken up from that head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, that coma and all that, as I said, at Fort Sam Houston. And then I was put in medical hold unit. When I was put in medical hold unit, there was that initial issue with technology. And after that, I was told that I wasn't allowed to touch the computers at Fort Sam Houston. I was no longer allowed to, realistically, touch anything that was too much used. I guess, I know that's not the best wording, but I couldn't do that. And so I was put on phone duty, had to answer the phone, which was kind of funny because there were a bunch of different individuals who wound up calling, and they're all military guys calling the base, of course, and every single, I can actually remember some guys that had called, I had answered, thanks for calling medical hold, this is Private Hom speaking, how may I help you? And a bunch of them just kind of, what? And, oh, how may I help you? And you sound like an operator or whatever, and it was what it was. I guess they just weren't expecting I don't know what the stereotype was for answering the phone at that time. I just answered it the way I did. And so then I was moved over to the Navy area where they taught me to count to 10. That's it. I didn't learn math, like, addition and subtraction and all that stuff. I learned how to count. Oh, that's how bad the after effects were for my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. So, going and fast forwarding in reference to being out of medical hold, but in San Antonio, Texas at the time, there was the laptop situation, and after talking with that guy that had salvaged that dissertation, thankfully, I had actually remembered a promise that I had made to some guys back in New Jersey when growing up. Because in New Jersey in the 1980s and 1990s, it's not like now where a lot of people are into techie stuff. Back in the 1980s and 1990s, a lot of the guys that I had been friends with that had been into technology stuff weren't necessarily bigger guys that played football or bigger guys that did wrestling. They were usually guys that, didn't really do much in a physical sort of way. And so I had made a couple promises, and a few of them were just like, yeah, okay, whatever. So, no. I'm going to handle stuff. And so I had remembered that particular set of promises. And so I had reiterated that promise to the guy who had saved that aspect because, those conversations up until he had gotten that information off of there and gotten that to my now dead ex-husband, they were what they were. And so anyway, I had actually told that guy what I had done because he looked at me and goes, how did you have flames come out of there? I said, oh, well, I got attuned to Reiki. I was just doing healing stuff so that way the people that use technology, the computer stuff would be able to get better and be better so that way they didn't have, the problems that I was feeling. And he just was like, oh my God. And I'm like, what? And he goes, seriously? He was taller than me, although I'm only 5'4", so there's a lot of people who are taller than me. And so, he listened to me quite a bit, and we talked a little bit, and he did. I don't think at the time he realized how much he actually saved me at that point in time. And, maybe later he wound up finding out, but at that time, I don't know if he fully understood how much he actually saved me from a lot in that regard because of what I was dealing with at that time. And, still appreciative, obviously, but I reiterated that promise essentially, where it was like, I'm going, no matter what, I'll do the best I can to not mess up, as far as just overall, but also make sure that techie guys are taken care of better because, usually they, at least even in the early 2000s, they weren't taken nearly as seriously. And it's not that they weren't taken as seriously in certain references, it was that they kind of still were in certain ways being picked on. And I didn't like that. It's a personal thing. I know I'm not the only one, but it is what it is. And so he didn't understand how I could do the energy thing, and I didn't get to fully explain it to him at that time beyond the little bit that I had discussed, mainly because my now dead ex-husband was there and I couldn't go into it because of the way things were. And otherwise, I would have explained certain aspects in regards to the spiritual stuff and gone into bigger details and stuff. However, I bet that guy would freak out seeing that. Because that's a 220 or 210 volt amperage in that thing for the refrigerator. And so, you know, when I have told people over the years, after especially that point in time in 2003, up until when I wound up in Washington State, about how I have issues with technology and how much it hurts to use certain things and do certain things, and with more stuff it being an issue. And that was before scuba diving as well as after scuba diving. There were a lot of people that didn't believe me at those times unless they actually saw with their own eyes that I had issues. Although the guys at Geek Squad and at Best Buy, they knew. They knew at first. Those guys were usually the first ones out of all the people that I had known in person. Those were the guys that actually saw. Like, there was one time I turned in a laptop and to Geek Squad, and the guy, he goes, well, what's wrong with it? I said, well, the screen looks like a TV. And he goes, what do you mean it looks like a TV? It looks like a TV when I turn it on, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And he said, no, you either get a blue screen or no screen. I was like, no, it looks like a TV. And he was like, no, what do you mean? So I turned on the computer, and I went and did the little, for those who remember bunny ears or rabbit ear television stuff, like that. And he just kind of looked and he was like, and then he looks at me and goes, oh my God, you had that head injury. I'm like, yep, that's so what do I do? How's that get fixed? He's I don't think you're going to get the laptop back. And by that point, I think that was the third or fourth time I had brought in a laptop. So I was like, oh, yeah, tell me something I don't know. I mean, it'd be great if I could. I don't think it's gonna happen though. I don't think I'm gonna get that back. So, you know, here you go. I'll wait. You know, sort of thing. But each of the Geek Squad guys that I spoke with, and each of the Best Buy guys that I spoke with, you know, we discussed a lot of the different aspects, and now it's almost like they all know. It's almost like every Geek Squad and Best Buy guy, like, it's already, yeah, I know. Like, they actually know. And, yeah, I've had problems with technology for a while, and so winding up in Washington State is a really smart thing that the people at Geek Squad and Best Buy had decided. Although I still kind of am confused by that, but it makes sense because I would guesstimate the techie stuff that's in those particular locations have more techie stuff in certain references, and that probably would make Mr. Gates and Mrs. Gates and Mr. Bezos and all the techie guys up there probably pretty happy that, you know, because that would have been an issue. That would have been. I already had issues with the technology stuff in that area by a lot. And so that right there where I can, that is because of being me. Though it's also because I've been electrocuted for so long and so many times. I mean, there wasn't a day in Washington, well, realistically, once getting into, like, above the Mason-Dixon line, essentially where Nevada is, and up, It's kind of like the Bermuda Triangle, where the Bermuda Triangle has a defined line area, and then there's still a little bit of residual stuff. So even though the line for the Mason-Dixon line is at a specific point in the United States of America, there's still a little bit of a residual aspect in regards to those who have studied rose lines and geographical lines like that understand that sort of stuff. And so in that reference point, in being above essentially the tip at Nevada, that sort of zapping really started taking a lot more, and it was really so much more painful. And so every second of every minute of every hour of every day that I had been above that area, specifically the Mason-Dixon line, but to the point where the residual energy essentially stops, I was being electrocuted. I mean, I didn't know that was the word. I just used zapping only because that's what I heard. I heard zap, 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 zap. So I called it zapping because I was being zapped. So I realize now it's being electrocuted. Don't recommend it. It's not fun. Nope. Especially when I'm already dealing with headaches and migraines. That definitely is not helpful at all. Whatsoever. Nope. It's quite painful. However, there was a point where when in Lakewood area, which is near Tacoma in Washington State, I had a whole bunch of e-cigarettes, and I was having more and more problems with the e-cigarettes, and that's why I can say that was a really smart move on the Best Buy and Geek Squad guys, because those were smaller batteries and a lot less techie stuff, and the issues that I had with those, well, multiply what's in a laptop in comparison to the e-cigarette battery, and that's what happened in a bigger way. That's another reason why I wasn't online nearly as much, because it hurt a lot to even put the stuff that I did on my website. And so going onto Facebook and whatnot like that, it was extremely painful. And so at least with my website, it would be more focused as to what I was doing, and then I'd get off of the computer and I wouldn't be zapped as much. And that's why I also was it was a protective measure. I mean, I don't personally know Mr. Gates like in person, and if I did, I wouldn't know unless he was like, "So hi, I'm Bill Gates." I still wouldn't know unless he was like, "So I own this." Oh, that's cool. I use your computer every now and then, or well, one that you have programs on and stuff like that. Other than that, what else do you want to talk about? Because there's like so much other stuff. Not saying that that's not important. Just I can talk about all sorts of stuff. And people in techie stuff, they don't always talk about techie stuff. Just like people in music don't always talk about music. There's different things that they're into. And so, I'm weird, I know it. However, in that reference of the aspects with the e-cigarette batteries, that's what happened with the Toro. I don't know if... I know I've discussed it before, So there was this one type of e-cigarette. It was a copper tube, and you put the external battery in it, and then you used your pinky to push the bottom button, and then you inhale the e-cigarette. And that hurt a lot. If anybody were to see that, beyond me, the electrical current actually was this extremely bright blue, and it wrapped in between each of my fingers. And then because I was touching metal, well, there are those who understand electrical conductive stuff, and so it wrapped in between all of my fingers, went through every fiber of my being, and was electrocuting me. And so that would be the visual of every second, of every minute, of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year that I was above that area, but just that little itty bitty bit of time. It was where you could see that zapping thing. So the reference of the electrical outlet there, well, even though it's technically less for the e-cigarette as far as the amperage and voltage, because of so many days of that continuously, well, that tolerance level, it went up. So, extremely, excruciatingly painful. Nonetheless, I do what I can, so that way it's not as bad. But yeah, so I could do that, and that's kind of part of it as far as that. So don't be jealous, because it still hurts. It's more of a tickle than a hurt by technicalities. So don't be jealous. But don't go and try that, because that should technically be dangerous. However, I've done a few things that, well, technically could be considered dangerous, and yet I survived. So, for whatever that's worth. So, yeah. However, I did what I could so that way everybody wouldn't be negatively impacted. It goes back to that aspect in regards to rekeying the laptop, of wanting to genuinely find a way for things to be better in a larger way than just me. I mean, you know, I'm going back to that aspect of figuring out what I needed to do to prevent that nightmare from going to the level that it did. And it was in my nightmare that wound up turning to a dream. That was part of it, was how it turned more to a dream, because of finding different ways to make it better and not as bad. Because the nightmare that I had, the first one, before I started figuring ways to make it better, there were no survivors from that day. From that nightmare. The entire planet was destroyed in that nightmare initially. And so, with each time of going through it, it was, how do I make it not do that? I know that sounds really weird because I was a child at the time. I just didn't want that to be that way because it was what it was, and so it didn't turn out that way, thankfully. And a lot of the aspects of the point where it went from a full nightmare to a dream has been, because dreams are better, didn't go to that level. That's a good thing. So anyway, you guys have a good one.